out of work. The number of Americans filing for unemployment continues to skyrocket. How the White House is responding. Getting a reaction. Cardinal George Pell weighs in on his acquittal earlier this week. A busy schedule. A preview of what Pope Francis will be doing in the days leading to Easter Sunday. And ready for the resurrection. How the faithful can catch a rare glimpse of the Shroud of Turin and other relics in the coming days. On EWTN News Nightly for Holy Thursday, April 9th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable reporting from home again tonight. In this Easter season of hope and new life, millions of Americans are no doubt worried about their financial futures. A staggering 16.8 million Americans lost their jobs in just the past 3 weeks. At the same time, health officials are warning people not to relax social distancing rules even during the holiest time of year for Christians. Correspondent Owen Jensen reports from the White House. Owen?
Tracy, here at the White House, the president is wishing the nation a happy Easter. In the meantime, the unemployment rate could hit 15% in April. This nation leads the world in coronavirus infections. And also, the Easter celebration on Sunday could be one of separation.
With Easter just days away, President Donald Trump shares a message of faith.
Well, we may be physically apart. We can use this time to pray, to reflect, and to focus on our personal relationship with God.
He held a conference call yesterday with 10,000 faith leaders to thank them for raising people's spirits.
And on Sunday, we celebrate our beautiful, wonderful Easter, which we all look forward to. And we're going to have many Easters together in churches in the future.
And as millions prepare to celebrate Easter 6 feet apart, new guidelines have been announced for essential workers who've been exposed to someone with the virus.
They could go back to work if they do several things, as we say here. Take their temperature before they go to work, wear a face mask at all times, and practice social distancing when they're at work.
Speaking of work, the stock market got off to a good start after the Fed announced a $2.3 trillion round of loans for households and businesses, massive aid to a reeling economy. New jobless numbers show 6.6 million American workers applied for unemployment benefits last week, on top of more than 10 million already sidelined. The real numbers could be even higher. Right now, there's no escaping the virus-plagued Earth, unless you're one of 3 astronauts who blasted off earlier, headed for the International Space Station, 1 American and 2 Russians, soaring high into the sky. But because of the pandemic, none of the astronauts' family members were there to bid them farewell.
Also, the airlines have cut flights drastically, and even so, most seats remain empty. United is burning through $100 million a day, Delta $60 million a day. Tracy?
Okay, thank you, Owen. Correspondent Owen Jensen reporting from the White House tonight. This morning, Senate Democrats blocked a request to pass another $250 billion in aid for small businesses. The attempt by Majority Leader Mitch McConnell for passage by unanimous consent was blocked by Democratic Senator Ben Cardin from Maryland. Correspondent Eric Rosales reports from home. Eric?
Well, that is correct, Tracy. You know, the Democrats may be in the minority in the Senate, but that didn't stop them today from preventing some action. Majority Leader was trying to be able to pass additional funding for small businesses, but Democrats say that Mitch McConnell's move was nothing more than a political stunt.
To my Democratic colleagues, please, do not block emergency aid you do not even oppose just because you want something more.
Despite the Majority Leader's plea, the attempt at unanimous consent quickly failed.
Now, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of the bill at the desk.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object.
Senator from Maryland.
The Majority Leader knew full well that there was not agreement and consensus on moving forward with this proposal. That's why we're here today. This was, in fact, designed to fail.
The $350 billion Paycheck Protection Program, which passed last week, gives low-interest loans to small businesses to cover rent, utilities, and payroll. Kevin Clark lives in Georgia and had to lay off all 40 employees from his restaurant, Homegrown. He applied to Wells Fargo for aid and has received nothing so far. Sunday, the bank announced it had reached its $10 billion limit. Applicants like Clark were advised, quote, "You may want to apply elsewhere."
We may lose our business. The worst part.
Senator Marco Rubio and other Republicans were aiming to inject $250 billion more into the program.
I'm literally talking about deleting the number 350 and writing 600 in its place.
Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill. Thank you, Eric. The head of a hospital in Wuhan, China, claims another large-scale outbreak of the coronavirus is not likely. Chinese doctors also say the COVID-19 virus will not disappear. Restrictions in the city where the pandemic started have been gradually eased as the number of official cases declined. The Vatican is thanking several organizations from China for helping to combat the coronavirus. In a statement earlier today, the Holy See press office said it expresses, quote, its gratitude to the bishops, the Catholic faithful, the institutions, and all the other Chinese citizens for this humanitarian initiative. The Vatican and Beijing reached a provisional deal in 2018 on the naming of bishops in the communist country. Coronavirus hit Italy is receiving help from a team of doctors from Russia. The medical team from Moscow features nearly 36 doctors and nurses. They're helping in an intensive care unit in Bergamo. The Kremlin also sent several mobile medical teams and equipment to help fight the pandemic. More than 17,000 people in Italy have died during the outbreak. An Australian Cardinal George Pell, who was freed from prison earlier this week, told reporters today about his reaction to the High Court's decision while asking for social distance.
I'd like to say that the court has made a very good decision. I'm sorry I'm not dressed a bit better, but I didn't expect visitors.
What was your reaction yesterday?
I was very pleased.
Were you surprised?
Not in the slightest.
Cardinal Pell spent more than 1 year in prison. The former Vatican official had been found guilty of 2 counts of child sexual abuse. Reporters caught up with him today at a gas station. He was driving with a friend to Sydney after staying at the Carmelite Monastery in Melbourne last night. A cathedral in Germany is restoring a shrine to Saint Corona. The shrine to the 2nd century martyr was made more than 100 years ago in the famous cathedral of Aachen, Germany. In parts of the country and Austria, some consider Saint Corona the patron saint against the spread of epidemics. And in France, the deadly coronavirus pandemic could not stop a traditional Holy Thursday blessing. Archbishop Michel Opati blessed the city of Paris and its inhabitants from the Sacré-Cœur Cathedral. Participants took precautions against COVID-19, including wearing face masks. Church services in the Catholic country have been banned since March 17th. Coming up, Holy Week challenges, plus how the faithful can see the Shroud of Turin tomorrow. Pope Francis reorganizes the Easter liturgy celebrated this year during the coronavirus lockdown. While there won't be a physical presence of the faithful, millions will still join the Holy Father spiritually through the internet. Alan Holdren, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief, joins us now from Rome via Skype. Alan, thanks for joining us. Can you walk us through the Pope's schedule for this Easter Triduum?
Yes, so today, Holy Thursday, there was no Chrism Mass, as in many other parts of the world. In the Vatican, in Rome, there's no Chrism Mass today. And the Holy Father celebrated Mass for the Lord's Supper, which he would usually have done at a prison outside of Rome or just somewhere around Rome. He didn't do that today. It was just a small celebration inside St. Peter's Basilica with a minor representation of the faithful, which will be the same sort of format for the rest of the liturgies of this Holy Week. and he didn't do the washing of the feet, which is normal for the rest of the world also in this coronavirus crisis. For Good Friday, we have the celebration of the Lord's Passion. Holy Father inside St. Peter's Basilica for that. And then just outside St. Peter's Basilica, he'll be leading the Stations of the Cross afterwards later in the evening. That's something he would have usually done from the Colosseum. And then on Saturday, we have the Easter Vigil. And then Sunday, we have Mass and the Urbi et Orbi blessing.
Easter is usually a time when Christians and Catholics, practicing or not, gather together. How do you think this year's Easter will affect the Universal Church?
Well, I think it has, other than the fact that we can't participate in the sacraments all directly in person, it obviously has a big effect on us for all of us to just participate by way of the media, and I think that will help us also to not take for granted the fact that in normal times we can always go into the church and participate in the sacraments physically.
What other Easter celebrations are happening, Alan?
Well, Tracy, there are a lot of initiatives that have cropped up that are of international interest. There was a prayer today from the Garden of Gethsemane in the Holy Land that was led by the Franciscans there. Tomorrow, Good Friday, we have the veneration of the relics of the Crown of Thorns, which are kept in Notre Dame Cathedral, which was burned in that terrible fire almost exactly a year ago today. And there's going to be a special broadcast from there of that event and prayer. And then also on Saturday, we have a special extraordinary exposition of the Shroud of Turin from Turin, Italy. And all of those events will actually be able to be seen live on EWTN.
Well, Alan, thank you so much for your time. Alan Holdren, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief.
Thank you, Tracy.
The celebration of the Easter Triduum this year will undoubtedly be different amid the global spread of COVID-19, but there are several special events that may help to serve as a source of spiritual comfort during this time. Joining me now to talk more about that is Dr. Matthew Bunson, Executive Editor and Washington Bureau Chief of EWTN News. Matthew, welcome back to the show. Good to see you.
Good to be with you, especially under such unusual circumstances.
Absolutely. Well, we know the Holy Week is traditionally marked by very public ceremonies and processions around the world, but this year is clearly different. Can you speak about that?
Well, this is a Triduum unlike any, certainly in our lifetime. You'd have to go very far into the history of the church to encounter anything quite like this. We could argue that we have to go all the way back to the time of the Black Death to see anything like this. Certainly the time of the Spanish influenza. But for Catholics, this is a unique opportunity for us then to really concentrate on what the Triduum really is, that the passion, death on the cross of our Lord, and then culminating with his resurrection. So events that surround it traditionally have assumed even more meaning, as we heard from Alan Holdren.
Despite the special nature of this year because of the pandemic, there are still opportunities for the faithful to celebrate, albeit new ways. Can you talk about that and also about the Shroud of Turin on Holy Saturday? Catholics around the world will have this incredible opportunity to pray before it virtually. And how exactly will that work, Matthew?
Well, that's right. So as Alan was reporting, on Good Friday, we're going to have a unique procession, a unique moment of veneration of the Crown of Thorns that historically was kept in Notre Dame Cathedral. It was rescued miraculously by firefighters at the time that Notre Dame Cathedral actually caught on fire through a human chain that saved it. This is one of the great relics of historical Christendom, brought supposedly from Constantinople to France and enshrined in the magnificent Sainte-Chapelle, which is one of those great churches in France, before being placed in Notre Dame. The opportunity to see that is unique in itself, especially given the circumstances of the fire last year. But then we have that opportunity to venerate the Shroud of Turin. Archbishop Cesare Nosiglia of Turin is going to have a special prayer service that will be streamed internationally. Both the Good Friday service and the Holy Saturday service from Turin are going to be broadcast by EWTN. So this is one of those rare opportunities that points to something even more significant, that this is a real chance for us to take stock of this Triduum and to add to it an even deeper meaning than it may already have for us.
Absolutely, and it's wonderful that people all around the world can see that, too. We remember seeing Pope Francis on the steps of St. Peter's Basilica before what many call the miraculous crucifix. I know there was some initial concern that it was damaged in the rain, but fortunately it wasn't. Can you explain to us the significant role that it plays in Easter liturgies?
Yes, well, this is the crucifix of San Marcello. It was housed in the church of San Marcello and is considered one of those great pieces of art. It was designed by the Sienese school, probably in the 14th or 15th century, and was hanging in a church in 1519 that effectively burned to the ground, but was miraculously spared. Only a few years later, in 1522, it helped Rome overcome a time of severe plague and has been revered for that role ever since. So it was remarkably appropriate that Pope Francis would then use that cross at the Urbi et Orbi. There was some concern because it was caught in the rain. There was a little bit of damage, given its age, from the rain, but the initial reports of severe damage were actually somewhat overstated. And as we saw, for example, in the Holy Thursday Mass, Pope Francis was able to use it once again. And I think it's become a real symbol of the coronavirus pandemic, certainly in Italy and for a lot of Catholics around the world.
Well, Matthew, we don't have a lot of time, but I want to ask you this last question. The Salus Populi Romani icon will also be present during all the liturgies. How has it taken on new symbolism during this coronavirus pandemic?
Well, this is an icon of the Blessed Mother that has a very rich antiquity. Pope Francis visited all of the Salus Populi Romani anytime he goes on a trip. It is normally housed at the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore. He used it as a special icon in his Urbi et Orbi. He visited it again. It goes all the way back, in fact, to 593, when Pope St. Gregory I used it in a procession in Rome to end a plague then. So just as it was 1,500 years ago, so it is now. We turn to the Blessed Mother for her intercession. And I think this is a beacon of hope, much like the crucifix of San Marcello, something that we can turn to. Exactly the same way that we do with the Shroud and the Crown of Thorns, always focusing ourselves on Christ at this moment of darkness for so many Catholics.
Matthew, thank you so much for your insight and for your time today. Dr. Matthew Bunson, Executive Editor and Washington Bureau Chief of EWTN News. Thanks again, Matthew.
Be safe.
Up next, how church leaders are preparing for Easter without public mass. Holy Week from home. As we've been mentioning today, many Catholics are having to change their regular routine in preparation for Easter. Correspondent Mark Irons joins us now from his home. Mark?
Tracy, we have seen many events postponed or canceled during this pandemic, but the Easter Triduum is not something that can be shifted around.
A Holy Week unlike any we've experienced before. A decree from the Vatican's Congregation for Divine Worship and the Sacraments says the Triduum cannot be transferred to another time, adding, Easter is at the heart of the entire liturgical year and is not simply one feast among others. Masses continue to be celebrated in churches around the country. Empty sanctuary seats, but people participating remotely and many relying on our own network.
We are absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to at least share Holy Mass through this medium of EWTN.
In Chandler, Indiana, this dad prepared his 4 young sons to participate in Palm Sunday Mass from their living room. And last night in Chantilly, Virginia, a social distance safe line formed outside St. Veronica's Church, the parishioners waiting for confession inside. And if that's not possible, drive-through confessions have been set up at some churches, including outside Boston.
We want to make sure that we can give them some level of spiritual sustenance.
Almighty and eternal God.
It's all a change from what we're used to. But Father Andrew Fisher in the Diocese of Arlington says Catholics have the opportunity to make a spiritual communion.
To have that disposition to open their heart to say, Lord, I believe in the Eucharist. I believe our Lord is present. I want to share in that moment of Christ's death and resurrection taking place at the Mass.
And when families can finally leave their houses, Father Fisher hopes they will return to their spiritual home.
So that when these days have turned to life again, that we can get to Mass, there'll be renewal of love for the Eucharist.
Some Protestant churchgoers may be able to enter their places of worship this weekend. That's because several governors in various states have deemed church an essential service. Tracy.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Correspondent Mark Irons reporting from his home tonight. Thank you, Mark. We are now at the holiest days of the church calendar, and EWTN has special Holy Week programming. Through Easter, we will have the Pope's Masses and liturgies from Rome, as well as celebrations from around the world. To see the Holy Week schedule and highlights, visit EWTN.com/Lent. Our website also has Eucharistic adoration from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We leave you now with the Pope's Holy Thursday Mass. Good night and God bless.